Okay. Hi, everybody. The stream is live. Welcome to First Fridays. I'm also going to go live on my phone here through Instagram. So have a lot going on here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to First Fridays. This is a McEntee Law regular feature where we do a live update from one of our immigration lawyers on, you've guessed it, the first Friday of the month. And today is Friday, May 2nd. I can't believe that it's May already. But I'm grateful for the nice weather, and in Chicago we have signs of spring with the trees in bloom and the birds starting to chirp, and it's just feeling like we've made it through the winter in terms of the weather. However, on the immigration front, we're certainly in a lot of dark times, I would say. And just like even preparing for today was just a little chaotic, if I'm being honest. I remember, we started this series in COVID. Originally, it was First Fridays with Fiona. And as our team grew, we added more people, to more attorneys, especially to our team. And then we kind of, spread it out and taking it in turns. And it's First Fridays with McEntee Law. But I mean, I remember a while ago preparing for the First Fridays, we prepared the news, kind of snippets of the immigration news, and, almost like scrambling to try to get things in to talk about. But that was not the case today. It was more a question of how many things can I talk about. Hi, Mike. Greetings from Chicago's Gold Coast. Wow, greetings from Old Irving Park. Here we're out in the office. Thanks for joining. We are going to be chatting about some immigration news and updates. There are so many things going on, as I'm sure you're probably aware. If you have, turned on your TV or your social media, there's just a lot of immigration news happening. Oh my gosh, greetings from Laois and Ireland. Thanks, Sarah. Welcome. Feel free to pop in the chat if you want to say where you're joining from. It's great to see everybody coming, the beauty of technology, joining near and far, and I'm grateful that you're all here. We will be recording this as well, so we can share it later. But yeah, so let's get stuck in. I'm going to start with some what I think is kind of happy news in a way. Yesterday was May Day, and there were protests all over the country, which is a positive sign for me. It makes me see the resistance and see that people do care about what's happening. It was nice to just see that kind of force of resistance, and just to see, I always love to see different signs and posters and t-shirts, and just like the kind of diversity of the crowd there. And I think for people who are feeling victimized by the current administration's immigration policy, just for them to see that there are a lot of people that are not okay with this, makes them feel, I think, a little bit better. And here in Chicago, there were a lot of protests held in Chicago and also in the suburbs. And May Day rallies are historically, they focus on organized labor, worker rights. And May Day is also International Workers' Day, and it commemorates unions and labor groups around the world. And we have long been a supporter of so many different union and labor groups, and we are just thrilled to see that kind of solidarity there. And something that I thought was quite interesting is that May Day has its origins in Chicago. And there was a march for an 8-hour workday back on May 1st, 1886, that was followed then in turn by a violent clash between demonstrators and police in what now is considered the West Loop. So anyway, power to the people. It's great to see, that just, I think, the breadth of protests. Obviously I'm a lawyer, and I know a lot of other lawyers, and I saw there were a whole bunch of lawyers protesting as well. Just the kind of constitutional crisis that we appear to be in. And I could see friends of mine from Washington DC all the way across to Washington State, and then lots of other people in between. So I know it's maybe, is it happy that we have to be protesting? No. So maybe that's not good news, but I am viewing that act of protest and resistance as just positive, because it means that people care and that they're noticing what's happening. So, okay, from that, we move into the Alien Enemies Act, which is just, it's crazy to think that immigrants are still being referred to as like aliens. And, it's the Biden administration actually removed that term from a lot of the policy, but the Trump administration has added it back in. And this administration loves referring to people as aliens. But what is interesting to note is you've probably seen some of these, like mass kind of deportations that were happening, where people were being sent to prisons in El Salvador, and often Venezuelan immigrants were being sent there. Really scary. People without criminal convictions were just finding themselves in just horrendous conditions, and who knows when they would be, getting out of there. It's just an awful prospect for people. Well, there was significant pushback on that, and basically the Trump administration had used this Alien Enemies Act as a grounds for deporting people in this manner. And people are asking, how is this allowed to happen? I mean, they basically kind of seized on this act and just started shipping people out. And then the lawyers responded. There was a bunch of litigation, and because we feel like it's illegal and should absolutely not have happened. And interestingly, this week, it might have been yesterday or the day before, sometimes my days get a little bit blurry with everything that's going on, but a Trump appointed federal judge, U.S. District Judge Fernandez Rodriguez, said that it is actually illegal for the administration to use this act to deport people. He said that the use of the Alien Enemies Act exceeds the scope of the law. So just important to note that, this is specific to deportations that are being, that are kind of happening as a direct result of the use of this Alien Enemies Act. And there are other ways to deport people, of course, where they go through a different process. But the Trump administration wanted to use this Alien Enemies Act to just get people out of the US as quickly as they could. And, the judge issued a 36-page opinion. He said that the use of this is unlawful. It exceeds the scope of centuries-old wartime law that allows the US to deport non-citizens with little to no due process during an invasion. And here's a quote: "The president cannot summarily declare that a foreign nation or government has threatened or perpetrated an invasion or predatory incursion of the US, followed by the identification of the Alien Enemies Act." So basically they were just saying, this is an invasion, we're using this act and we're getting people out as soon as possible. And they said, no, that, you can't use that, and that exceeds the scope. We're not at war. This is not an invasion that was thought about in the act when it was enacted. And I think, it's important to think about. So the Alien Enemies Act was enacted in 1798. And it's only been used 3 times since then, and it allows the president to detain or deport citizens of an enemy nation, but in where there's a declared war or an invasion. And they were trying to say that the alleged Venezuelan gang members, and I will say that the majority of people that have been deported and are now in an El Salvador prison, didn't have any criminal convictions as well. So anyway, that was a great hearing from the judge. It's the first time that a judge has said that the use of this is illegal. And again, just to reiterate for people who might have missed it at the start, this is a Trump appointed judge who has held that this is not a legal use of the act. So we'll see. So on to news. People may have heard, I know we have a lot of viewers from Ireland tuning in. It's been all over the news that there was an Irish woman by the name of Cleena Ward, who was a longtime resident of California. She was detained by ICE earlier in just a little while ago, earlier in the month, but it means the month of April. I'm just reading some notes. After she traveled home, so she had a green card, had been living in California for, I think, decades, traveled home to see her terminally ill father. And on return, went through the airport, the inspection, and basically she had some, I believe, very old criminal convictions related to a drug addiction that she has since, long overcome and been sober for years, I believe. And she was under the impression that her records had been expunged, but for immigration, that's not necessarily always the case. But anyway, she now is detained. And we were chatting internally about, people who have overcome, addiction. And I don't know the specifics of her case, but we should be applauding people who have been clean and sober for decades and have, really, she was, I think she worked for a nonprofit in California and had been contributing to the community and was really well liked, and went home to visit her terminally ill father. And now she's detained in ICE custody. So I don't know more details of the case. I wanted to share it though as a cautionary tale, because in addition to all the travel warnings that you're hearing about, for visitors and searches of electronic devices, this is something that we are seeing a lot more of: heightened scrutiny of green card holders who are returning from trips abroad. So if there's, someone who has a green card who, things that might trigger extended, someone saying misdemeanor for cannabis. Yeah, I don't know the details of her criminal conviction. I know there was something related to something years and years ago, but it basically kind of, if there's any type of criminal blemish, however big or small, on your case, you should really consult with an attorney before you travel, because it can certainly cause issues coming back in. And it's just, one of those things that you don't necessarily know that it's going to happen until it happens. And so we would just urge people to to just use caution, because this woman, she's not the first person that we've heard of with kind of facing issues coming back from being abroad with the green card. So like I said, we're not working with this lady. I don't know anything about the details of her case, but from what I read, it was like minor criminal things from years and years ago that she believed were all sorted. And, now, unfortunately, she's dealing with being detained by ICE. So, just be extra cautious. And on that note, we had asked for questions if people had questions ahead of time, and I did get some in, and I'm going to answer this question now because it's related, I guess, to this topic. So people are talking about, in this moment, is it recommended to travel with your student visa to your home country? So this is not necessarily exactly on the point of, green card holders returning, but it is in relation to travel. And I think people do need to be extra cautious when it comes to travel. For international students, you've probably seen there was just absolute chaos, is the only way you can describe it. What happened with international students, where ICE and the State Department, the State Department cancelled thousands of student visas, and the ICE, who's in charge of the records, the kind of records or the status of students, terminated their records. So kind of overnight and with no notice, again, kind of on brand for the administration, no notice, no due process. Immediately thousands of international students were out of status, and there was a whole bunch of litigation. There were court orders issued. There were a bunch of temporary injunctions issued by judges all across the US, blocking the termination of these records. And so, but for these students, it's not clear. So anyway, there was all these court orders that happened, and then the administration kind of changed their position and said, okay, we're not going to be terminating the records. So it's still really complex, and there's still issues ongoing. And then some of those students, they still had their visa stamps revoked by the State Department. So this person asked a question about their student, and they want to know if it's safe to travel. And, I would say you should definitely consult with your school and see for international students, make sure there's absolutely no criminal interactions of any kind. We saw people have their status terminated for something as little as like speeding, like a minor speeding ticket or parking, traffic infractions. So I think for international students, you just really need to be careful about traveling. Also, if you are doing any type of like social media, you need to know that the government is like using AI to scan people's social media, and this is not like me with my foil hat on and like spreading conspiracy theories. Like, they mentioned this in their press release. They said they're going to be using AI to like scan social media accounts, and if there are any type of like posts relate that they deem to be like anti-US, which is totally open to interpretation how they're making those determinations. I don't know, but if there's anything in relation to the Palestinian people, they seem to be labeling that as like anti-Semitic, anti-US foreign policy. And there are some very high profile cases that we've seen. So I would just urge people to be really cautious about international travel and just to be aware. Also, when you're returning into the US, CBP can and likely, depending on your situation, they're not going to go through everybody's phone, but they do have the authority to, search through your phone, certainly for visa holders and for visitors to the US. And that is definitely increasing as well. So just be careful. I'm not saying definitely don't travel, but I just would really urge people to just be careful and to get some advice before you depart the US. So speaking of, kind of activism, there was a high profile case of a Palestinian student that was detained. Mohsen Madawi, I believe his name is. He was the student that went in for what he believed was a citizenship interview and ended up getting detained, and they were trying to deport him. So I just saw that he has been released this week, and I think it's kind of notable. If you hear him speak, he talks about peace. He's not kind of promoting the eradication of any group of people. He is promoting peace and like two-state solution. And this is an ongoing case, but the judge released him, and he was very I think grateful for that. And also, we're in the US, where freedom of speech has long been a cherished constitutional right. And, we don't have to agree with everybody's speech, but it's, peaceful speech that is putting forth a view that you don't, agree with is not a grounds for deportation, and it never has been. But this is certainly the way this administration is kind of heading. So if there is anything on your social media that is in any way related to that, I think that might be an issue. If you're, talking about Palestinian people, we've seen that be an issue here in the US. So I need a bit of coffee. There's a lot going on. I have like all these bullet points of certain things. But thank you all for jumping on. I have like lots of other news to get through. Okay, what else? There is some other litigation news. A judge has temporarily halted part of a notice that was trying to end parole for people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. So that's kind of an ongoing thing as well. If you're in that situation, you should definitely discuss this with an attorney and just see what are your options in relation to your parole and any other immigration options. There were, I think, 3 new immigration related executive orders this week, or maybe was it this week? I don't know. And over the past like week or two, one in relation to like sanctuary jurisdictions, one to bolster legal resources to police officers. And then another one, which is enforce existing laws requiring professional truck drivers to be proficient in English. Okay, so I don't know. I haven't really heard too much about that one, but it's on my list. Also, something big that we saw, there were apparently some US citizen children that were deported along with their their immigrant mother. I saw their immigration attorney speak, and it was extremely troubling hearing what she had to say. As attorneys, we have an ethical obligation to tell the truth. And so I would imagine she's making representations on, the news about what happened to her client. And I would absolutely assume that she's, telling the truth. But according to this attorney, the woman was not given sufficient time to consult with the father of the child in relation to these US citizen children. So they were not given time to have a discussion to figure out what should happen to the kids. And basically the children were deported, US citizen children with their mom. And actually, I don't know that that's a huge surprise, because that was actually what the administration had said at the start of this year. They said, somebody asked, what about US citizen children and separating mixed status families? And Tom Homan said, well, they'll just go with them. They'll all just go. So, again, these are things that the administration, threatened and promised. And they're kind of like fulfilling a lot of what they said, which is terrifying. So what else? Yeah, there's just like a lot going on. These are kind of the main, I would say, high level types of like news that we've been seeing. Some other questions that we got. Somebody asked in relation to an adjustment of status for a marriage-based green card. Does it need to be approved before your current visa expires? So I don't want to give you advice in relation to your situation, but because I just don't know all the specifics, and sometimes people, refer to different. When we say one thing, green card and whatever, we might mean different things. But in general, if you have a pending adjustment of status, so like a pending green card in process, you should be able to like be here on the basis of that. So that's kind of how it generally has worked up until this point. So if you file something, you should be able to be here on the basis of that. However, if you're able to maintain your underlying visa throughout the process, that is generally the recommended approach, depending on what visa you're on. So for example, let's say you're here as on a H-1B visa as a worker. So you're here working on your H-1B visa, and you get married to a US citizen, and then you're able to file for a marriage-based green card. Your US citizen spouse can sponsor you for your green card. If you are able to keep up that H-1B visa while the marriage-based green card is in process, that's the most ideal situation, because if anything was to happen with the green card process, if for some reason it was denied or there was some issue with it, you would still have that underlying visa. So, that's just one example. I would want to talk to you, or you should probably consult with somebody to see, what is your underlying visa? Is it possible to maintain it while the process is ongoing? Sometimes it's not. And if so, generally people have been able to be here on the basis of the pending adjustment of status. So that's kind of some general info, but not really specific to your situation. Somebody's asking, is the consular report of birth abroad affected or unaffected by the current administration? I have not heard about this being affected, so I'm not sure. So this is for people who's like US citizens who are living abroad, who have a child abroad, who the child is a US citizen at birth, but they're trying to register that child's birth. I haven't heard of any impacts to that. It's not to say there haven't been. There could be, but I haven't heard of them. I probably would have if there had been some changes, but granted, there are a lot of changes that are coming fast and furious. So, we maybe haven't heard of every single one. Okay, someone said they're from Ireland. They're currently in the green card process. How likely are we to succeed for an L1 if we are from Ireland? It's been 16 months. Okay, so, your country of origin shouldn't necessarily dictate your chances of getting anything approved. So it depends on the on the green card process itself. So if you're on an L, that's the multinational executive or manager visa, the L1A, and there's a green card version of that, which is the EB1C, the multinational executive or manager green card. So I mean, there is the L1A process. there is that corresponding green card. So if you're going through that process, as you probably know, you can go straight to the I-140 and the 485. You can skip a part of the PERM, which is the recruitment process that other green cards have to go through. So it is nothing's guaranteed, right? So we can't say if you're likely or not likely, and who knows, the specifics of your case, and really where you're from isn't going to play into it at all. So I would just advise you to keep in touch with the attorney. The company would have a lawyer, and you can just keep up to date with them. Processing times, you're saying it's been 16 months. I mean, processing times are probably going to increase because I think the federal government is making reductions in force, even in some of these, immigration agencies. So, we might expect processing times to even increase even further. But it sounds like you're well on your way there, and hopefully not too much longer, but I would definitely encourage you to keep in touch with the attorney. And then just one thing, okay, so somebody asked a question, I will definitely answer that. And so thank you for asking the question about the O1 visa. So one thing I didn't mention earlier, but I'm going to mention it now, is there are apparently travel bans coming for people from various countries. If you recall last time, days into the previous Trump administration, there was the Muslim ban, and we were very active in terms of, representing people at the airports and just doing a lot of advocacy. And we also sued the administration in federal court in relation to that. So there's been some rumors that there are some bans coming. We haven't seen anything, as of yet. But I've seen a couple of, rumored lists about certain countries and certain kind of tiers of countries. So if you're here on if you're from one of those countries, and you can look up those lists, I don't know how accurate they are. But there's a chance that there could be a travel ban coming that would prevent people who are citizens of those countries from coming into the US. So that would be something to keep in mind in terms of travel. If you're here and you think there's a chance your country of origin might end up on a travel ban list, well, that might be a reason to stay put, an even further reason to stay put. And so that's could relate to that international student who asked that question, or any type of visa holder as well. So, I think if we've learned anything, it's that the Trump administration is pretty unpredictable, and they're willing to bend the laws to, like this Alien Enemies Act, in ways that really is illegal. And it's not just my opinion. There's a federal judge who has said that. Same with international students. They do things with no notice, take immediate action, and, with extremely detrimental effects on people. So, you always kind of have to keep that in mind. Okay, so somebody's saying, if I fast track my O1 visa, how many months would it take to approve? Okay, love that you asked that, because we do a ton of O1 visas in our firm. So the O1 is the extraordinary ability visa. There's different types. There's the O1A, which is for people with extraordinary ability in business, science, education, athletics, and then the O1B is the arts and entertainment. And this person is asking about fast tracking it and how long would it take. So fast tracking, I think, I believe what the person's asking is about premium processing, which is a way that you can pay an additional fee to the government. Now it's nearly $3,000 of a fee, so it's pretty hefty. But it ensures that the government will review your case within 3 weeks of it being filed. So let's say you filed it today, within 15 business days. It used to be calendar days, which meant it was 2 weeks, but now it's business days, so it's 3 weeks. So the government will either approve it, and also, so you'll get an email electronic receipt notice, so you get it receipted with the premium processing. Otherwise, you're waiting for snail mail receipt notice. So you'll get the email notification, you'll get the receipt notice, and within 3 weeks, the case will either get approved, or they could issue a request for evidence, or a notice of intent to deny, which we haven't really seen one of those, but generally you'll either get it approved, or a request for evidence will happen within a 3 week period. And so if it gets approved, that's great. depending on kind of where you are, whether you're here in the US, if it was filed as a change of status, or if you're here, or if you're abroad and it was filed as a notify the embassy case, what we would call a consular notification case. If it's filed in that way, then you'll have to get your visa stamp and then come into the US to be in O1 status. So that's kind of best case scenario if it gets approved straight away. Within a 3-week period, and then you just need to either, schedule your appointment if that's the route that you went down. Otherwise, if they issue a request for evidence, you'll get the request for evidence in a 3-week period, and then you'll work with your attorneys to see what additional evidence they need, and then the attorneys will work on that, get the request for evidence filed and submitted, and then the 3-week clock starts again. So that's a really long-winded answer because there's no succinct way to say, like, well, I guess you could say it depends, right? Because what it depends on is whether a request for evidence is issued, and if so, that will delay the adjudication of the case. So yeah, and I will say we are seeing increased requests for evidence in O1 cases under this administration, and that is not a huge surprise given what we saw the last time with this administration. So they're just upping the scrutiny, reducing the federal workforce, causing a lot of chaos, a lot of hardship. But the good news is that we have been here before. We've dealt with this administration before. You can see that people are more prepared. You can see that the lawyers are more prepared. The ACLU, our immigration bar, we are a lot more prepared, and we are ready to resist and to, show that the law is on our side, which we've already seen. There's been tremendous results in litigation so far. And you just need to look at the international student situation and see. And if you've joined late and you don't know what I'm talking about, there were a lot of lawsuits filed for international students because overnight the federal government terminated the status of thousands of international students often for no reason at all, and without a chance for them to kind of have due process, which is part of the MO of the administration, is just getting people out of here, no due process, no right to a hearing, or to have their kind of day in court. But yeah, we're ready and we will be here. And even though it's a pretty tumultuous time, and I know it can be a scary time for a lot of people, there's nobody that I would rather have my back than an army of immigration lawyers. So it makes me very proud to be part of this community. We have an amazing team here at McEntee Law. We added a new attorney to our team this week, Claire. We added a new case manager, Zine. We added a new client coordinator, Isa. You'll get to meet all these people as well. We'll be sharing some info on them over the coming weeks. And yeah, we just have a great team, and we are happy to be here to help. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad that was I'm glad you asked that question, because that's certainly something I can answer in my sleep about O1s and processing times. So hope everybody has a nice weekend. Just remember that it's important to switch off and to do whatever, fulfills you and makes you kind of fill up your cup, right? So you cannot pour from an empty cup. So that looks differently for everybody. For me, what I love doing is watching my kids play sports. We have a weekend full of double-header volleyball games, baseball, and, a million basketball games. And I love it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And so whatever fills up your cup, do that. And catch us next time on First Fridays. There will be a different attorney speaking. We'll take it in turns, but we're doing a lot of social media, as you can see, a lot of marketing, a lot of resources. I'll just shout out the O1B guide that attorney Anna Potter and I wrote, and that got released out into the wild over the past week or two, and people are loving it, and it's great to see because we worked really hard on it, and our team helped a lot with the design, and we did it all in-house. So yeah, so check that out. We can share the link if you're interested in taking a look at that. And yeah, thanks for joining. Stay safe, everybody, and be well, and I will catch you next time.